Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful and historic neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We love that you are part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podchaser, or wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Judy Gilliam. She is the author of Cracked and Patched Family. Before we invite Judy into the studio, I want to join with Mayor John Mitchell and invite you to New Bedford, Massachusetts to celebrate New Year's Eve. That's right, in just 2 days from when we are publishing this, Jed Lee's Totally Interactive Magic Circus will be a part of City Celebrates New Year's Eve, presented by the beautiful city of New Bedford, Massachusetts. I have been so excited to be a part of this celebration for at least the past 15 years, but probably closer to 18 or 20. It is a beautiful event. There's so many things going on all around downtown New Bedford. The Toe Jam Puppet Band will be there. DJ Angeli will be there. Overhead Arts will be there with stilt walkers, glow hoops, Cirque Delight will heat up the night with improvisational fire spinning. And, of course, Jed Lee's Totally Interactive Magic Circus will be presenting 2 amazing Totally Interactive Magic shows at New Bedford Public Library. It's all part of City Celebrates New Year's Eve, New Bedford, Massachusetts. Historic New Bedford, Massachusetts. You can learn more by going to destinationnewbedford.org. Joining us on the line right now from outside of the beautiful city of Atlanta. She is a soon-to-be published author. I'm really excited. Her soon-to-be published book, and it will be published by our friends at Familius, is tentatively titled Cracked and Patched Family. Please welcome to the show, Judy Gilliam. Judy, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on. This is very exciting to me.
And I'm really excited to have you on, and I'm really excited to have a conversation both about the subject of your book and also about the journey that you're taking. Cracked and Patched Family, I said that's a tentative title. It's been purchased and will be published by our folks at Familius. It's scheduled to be published in the fall of 2020. We're speaking right now at the end of 2019, and this must have been a really kind of wonderful, scary, frustrating roller coaster ride to get to this point.
Well, it has been, and I think it's a hopeful story for those folks who are listening that might be in the place where I was. I came up with an idea that was based on my own family and particularly on my grandchildren as they looked at a family that was not traditional in any way, and they were trying to come to terms with, well, who are all these people, after you have divorces and adoptions and other rearrangement of families. Who are all these people? So that was the genesis of this. And I, like many people, I bought one of those books that I think is like the Bible of children's writers and illustrators, and it is called Children Writer and Illustrator Marketplace. Mm-hmm. And I bought that after I had written the book, and I went through it painstakingly and looked at each and every publishing company and if I was a fit for them. And when I thought I was a fit, I would send my manuscript with my query letter to the correct address, and mostly it was through email. And I would wait, and for the most part, I would get very nice rejection notices. I mean, they even made you feel good when they were telling you weren't a fit for them. Uh-huh. But one day in May of, I guess it was 2018, I literally, like all of us, sitting there looking at my email, and up pops an email from Christopher Robbins, and he says, "Hi, Judy, we we think your book is very clever and we'd like to publish it. Well, I just about, as we would say in the South, fell out. I had to sit down and read it about 4 times before I thought, this is for real. After I got over the shock, I immediately contacted, replied to that and said, I can speak to you anytime, day or night. And so that was the beginning of this journey that I've been on with the Familius Publishing Company.
Well, I can certainly relate to that idea of getting the email and not believing it. When I received an email from the folks at iHeartRadio letting me know that my show is nominated for the Best Kids and Family Podcast Award, I proceeded to ignore it. I said, there's no way.
Right.
But
is this a joke?
Exactly. And thankfully they wrote back. And then when I told my wife, she goes, yeah, right.
Yeah. I know. It's very exciting. And then, then the journey starts, and being an educator, as I have been all of my professional life, I'm not familiar with the publishing business. So I have been very lucky to have been in league with the Familius group, because they know what they're doing, and I certainly don't, but it's a wonderful feeling to have somebody guiding you, and they pick the illustrator, and I have been brought into the discussion with the illustrations that this artist has done. And as we've talked about changing the name of my book, I've also been brought in and asked to give some alternative names. So, I feel like I'm a vital part of this discussion, but I am relying on them to lead the way. And that's a good choice, because they're the professionals. They know what they're doing. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So this has been very exciting, and then I can relate to people who don't get that nice email about we'd like to publish your book, because a friend of mine and I have written a series of books about a therapy dog that deals particularly with children's mental health, and we've probably had 50 rejections. We believe in this book, and it's going to happen. You just have to keep pushing it out to publishers and to agents, and just trying to get the vision out there. And I truly believe somebody's going to see the need for this. I think children's mental health is probably the most ignored epidemic we have in this country.
Boy, oh boy, you're so right about that. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that families are changing, and the traditional family unit that, like I kind of grew up in, with the 2.5 children. My third child would be upset about me saying that. But, the family life has changed, and that's what your book that will be published about by Familius is all about. Tell us a little bit about Cracked and Patched Family.
Well, it came from a conversation that I had with my oldest granddaughter. It had been a week where she and my son, who is her father, and their family had been back in touch with some people that had been out of their lives for quite a while. And the week involved their meeting 3 distinct groups of family members that they really didn't know, and they didn't know exactly how they fit into these new family members. And so my granddaughter Abby came in, and she kind of looked at me sheepishly, and you could tell there was something on her mind. And I said, honey, I know you've met a lot of different people this week. Is there anything you want to ask me about this? And, is there anything that is bothering you that you want to know more about, as far as who this person and how they're related to you? And she just looked so confused that I thought, there are a lot of kids, and she was probably probably around 8 at the time. There are a lot of kids that have branches on their family tree that they don't exactly know who all the nuts and berries are. So that was the way this thing came to be. It's almost as if an explanation of how family members fit together. And I did it in the context of a classroom project that a teacher gives a child to draw her family tree.
What a great idea. It is true these days. You know, I grew up, and it was really difficult for me growing up. I mean, you're going to start crying about this. It's terrible. I grew up in my neighborhood. I was related to everybody in the neighborhood. So it was really great, you know, because you could just walk down the street and see my grandmother and see my godmother and all that other stuff. But the thing that was so hard about it was I couldn't get away with anything. I mean, I would get up to some mischief and someone would come out and they'd yell at me and I go, "Who are you?" And they go, "I'm your cousin." And I'm like,
right.
Boy.
Yeah, I understand that. I had a little bit of that myself, but in this case of the genesis of Cracked and Patched, it was an 8-year-old trying to come to terms with who are all these people,
right,
and how are they interconnected, and where would they fit on my family tree. And so that was, you know, that was the way I did it, and I was really pleased with it. I think, having been an educator in public school for 40 years, I know that kids come to us in public school from all different sorts of family dynamic, and they are sometimes, you know, reluctant to call attention to the fact that they are different than everybody else. And so this is an attempt to maybe open that door a little bit and have a discussion about, you know, my main character is named Florence, and have a discussion about Florence and her very extended family. And how they're quite different than your typical, as you said, 2.5 kids.
Right. Yeah. So important. And nowadays too, you know, families are changing, and, you know, with divorce and foster kids and all the other kind of stuff. I guess the one, you know, I love this book because I think it's an important book for you know, for kids that are dealing with these kind of challenges and questions about family. I also think it's a great book to have for that kid that might be in a really stable family, but they have friends that, you know, their families are in uproars, and it would be a great way for those kids to kind of understand and have empathy for their classmates and friends.
Absolutely. I think it could be a great teaching tool in the classroom, as well as with parents who find themselves in the midst of a divorce or a remarriage or an adoption or even a death, although that's not a part of my book. But, you know, it could open the door to how families are rearranged. Because, you know, I would think, this is my personal experience as an educator, we see many more kids that come from homes that are not your traditional than we see. You know, I spent 7 years at Fort Benning, which is a Department of Defense school, and I was a principal of a school on post. And, you know, the military families are so different, and the way they have to arrange the way they do business because of deployment and, you know, moving so many times. So I like the idea of teachers using this book to really talk about differences in families.
Now, as you were mentioning that you were in education for many, many years, did the family dynamics change in that time, or was it always the fact that you had a really diverse kind of group of families in schools, and it was just, you know, we just thought everybody had that traditional family?
Well, actually, I started teaching in 1971, and that seems like when the earth was cooling, I know. But at that point, the kids that came to my school typically had a mom and dad. Typically. It was in 71, it was still unusual to have a single parent or a divorced parent. As I moved through the years and retired from public school in 2010, by that point, we had, grandmothers raising kids and single mothers, single fathers. We had foster parents. We had homeless children. I was in a large metro Atlanta district, and we had all sorts of different configurations of families. And as I said, the traditional was definitely not the norm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it has changed. Yeah. Very much so.
And one of the great things about a book like Cracked and Patched is that I think it's really important for us to sit down and read with our kids, to remind them it doesn't matter what kind of a family you're in or what kind of a family your classmates are part of. Everybody deserves respect.
Right. Yeah. And really, that's the way that the book ends, is that Florence comes to terms with the fact that she may have the biggest family tree in the whole classroom, but she's right in the center of it, and all these are her peeps. Mm-hmm. And so it does give that respect to the fact that all of these folks that love Florence are involved and are a part of her family.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned is that as an educator for so many years, you think that the mental health of children is one of the things that we really overlook. How did do you think that kids have more mental health issues now than they had when you started, or do you think that we're just better at diagnosing it or identifying it?
I think that's a part of it, the diagnosing and identifying for sure, and the training of teachers to understand more about what they're seeing when they are engaged with their class. I think when I started out all those years ago, families tended to take care of their own mental health issues in their own ways, good or bad. But they took care of them, and they really didn't spill over into the school system as much. What has happened, I believe, over the years is technology, social media, really the disintegration of the family in a lot of cases where the parents are so busy and maybe they're working 2 or 3 jobs just to make a living. There's not that core that used to take care of those mental health issues. I have seen a lot of bullying that leads to children being fearful and lonely and depressed. I think depression is a huge issue that we see, and I've read a lot about this because, as I said, my friend and I, who's a clinical psychologist, wrote this series of books about a therapy dog. And, as I read and got prepared to write the book about T-Dog, is what we call him, is you saw this overwhelming depression among young children. Not, we think about teenagers, but I'm talking about under 12, kids that are severely depressed and suicidal. Mm-hmm. So that's, I know this sounds like a downer to talk about it, but I think it's something we have not as a nation really addressed, and it's woefully lacking in schools. And I can say that because I was a part of those schools. We're afraid of dealing with mental health with young children.
Well, no argument from me. I have a very vivid memory of when I started performing my educational magic shows at schools. I was at a school, and one of the teachers was telling me beforehand that a fifth grader, one of the fifth graders, just a week before I was there, had committed suicide.
Right.
And so in getting ready to start the show, the principal came in and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm really sorry. I understand, and heard about your fifth grader. Do you want me to address that in any way?" It was a character education kind of show, making healthy choices. Mm-hmm. And the principal snapped at me and he said, "That child did not commit suicide. The child was 10 years old. A 10-year-old cannot commit suicide."
Right.
And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that is the mindset of not just educators, but the general public.
Yeah.
They just don't think that. And we've got a lot of kids out there who are depressed and who are, they're in great need. And I just believe that we're not addressing this.
I agree. And it frightens me. As I travel around, there are some systems where I'm working in the school system. They're very, they have specialists working with their primary school kids, and they'll tell me, my job is to identify the kids who may grow up to bring a gun to school when they're in high school. We want to find them now and give them the services that they need now.
Sure.
And there are other systems where they're just not dealing with anything.
Right. And right. I see that myself. And that's extremely frightening to me for the child and for society. Because if the child goes untreated as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, they spiral out of control. By the time they're in 5th and 6th grade, it's almost too late.
Yeah. Terrifying. Well, one of the things that we are all about here at the Reading with Your Kids podcast is obviously encouraging our families to read more together, no matter what the family looks like and no matter what your title is. As an educator, how important did you feel it was for families to read together? And what do you think were the most important benefits that kids and parents get from it?
Well, I'm so glad you asked me that question because my doctoral dissertation was on uninterrupted, sustained, silent reading. And that's a whole nother podcast for you.
Yes,
but I can
just
tell
getting
you
that title down.
But my research showed that reading, and particularly when students are allowed to read of their choice and things they're interested in, there were 3 things that I looked at. That was attendance at school, attitude towards reading and school, and also achievement. And in all 3 cases, the research that I did on students who engaged in uninterrupted, sustained, silent reading went up significantly in all 3 of those areas. And the demographic that went up the most was Black boys.
Wow.
So, yeah. So you're talking to somebody who absolutely believes in their heart that students must read of their choosing, things that interest them, as well as be read to. I think that's absolutely so important to be read to. Now, and not just as a kindergartner, I would say.
That's what I was going to ask you. What about the reading with those kids who are getting in that significant reading, silent reading time? What's the benefit of reading to that 10-year-old, 12-year-old, or co-reading with your 15-year-olds?
Well, in what I have found, and I was a 5th and 6th grade teacher for some of my career, I always read to my students at least 15 to 20 minutes every day after lunch, and they came to love it, and we read wonderful books. Where the Red Fern Grows, and The Great Gilly Hopkins, and Hatchet, and all those great books. And I have had so many of my old students get in touch with me and say, that made all the difference to me. I realized there was more to the world than this little tiny southern town on the outskirts of Atlanta. And I just think that's powerful. Reading to students, as you said, all the way up until they're 15, 16 in high school. Kids love to be read to, especially if the teacher or the reader is one who, uses voices and exaggerates some action, perhaps. I think that's very important. But also coupled with that is that they get to read quietly, silently, of their own choosing. That's very important.
Yeah. I just had the most wonderful experience. My niece is 15, and we hadn't been able to she'd been very busy in school, and I've been able to go see her play soccer, but we haven't been able to sit down and spend some significant time together. And this past weekend, we had a chance to go out to brunch, and we sat down, and she was so excited. She spent 20 minutes telling me the story of The Great Gatsby in specific detail. And she kept on saying, well, I'm not going to tell you the whole story. And then she told me the whole story. But it was wonderful to see how excited she was about it.
Yeah, there's just nothing better. And then when you love reading the way you and I do as adults, I mean, there's nothing that is more pleasurable and to be quiet, to calm yourself, to go outside of your own problems, etc., than to read a great book.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I have books in the house, books at the gym, books on tape.
Yeah. I'm a member of 2 book clubs, and I'm very heartened to see that young women are doing this as well. It's not just for us old girls that I'm seeing, young ladies, women in their 30s that are getting together and reading really great books and having super discussions.
Well, I think I've had such a fun time. This has been a super discussion. We've bounced all over the world. We talked about the journey of, a first-time published author and talked a little bit about education and how that's changed over the decades. But most of all, we've talked about the soon-to-be published book, Cracked and Patched Family. It's a tentative title. Our friends at Familius are polishing it up, putting the finishing touches on it, getting the illustrations ready, and possibly changing the title. But it will be available sometime in the fall of 2020. I know that you're working on a website, but is there any way for folks to connect with Judy Gilliam online?
Well, I'm on Facebook, of course. I guess everybody in the world is on Facebook. And I have an email that I would love to give out if that's appropriate.
That is very appropriate.
Okay, it's Gilliam, Gilliam.j@hotmail.com.
Awesome. We've had such a great time talking to the author of the soon-to-be published Cracked and Patched Family, Judy Gilliam. Judy, thank you so much, and we would love to have you back on the show when Familius and when you and Familius finally decide on the title, and when you have a publication date, we'd love to have you come back and talk about the book.
And I want to do that, so let's be in touch.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We will be looking back at some of the best moments in 2019 here on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It's been a monumental year. I mean, it all started off back in January in Los Angeles at the iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award. Well, it's the iHeartRadio Podcast Awards, and we were nominated for the Best Kids and Family Podcast Award. It was a great way to start off the year, and we've had some fantastic guests. And we'll be sharing highlights from 3 or 4 of those favorite interviews on the next episode of the show. We want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, we want to thank our guest, Judy Gilliam. Be sure to keep your eyes open for Cracked and Patched Families. In fact, what you should do is go to Familius Talk and be sure to sign up for their newsletter. Familius is a great family publishing. They're all about helping families be happy. And we love that they are such a great part of our Reading with Your Kids family. Kate Farrell, the marketing director there, Chris Robbins, the publisher, all the authors that we've had on. I want to thank them for today's show and also for all the great shows that they've helped out with. Also want to thank my amazing producer, Fatima Khan. Be sure to check out her blog at readingwithyourkids.com. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.